My name is Valluvan Jeevanandam, and I am the Chief of Cardiac Surgery and the Director of the Heart and Vascular Institute and the Cynthia Chow Professor of Surgery at the University of Chicago. You are listening to Interview with the Surgeon with the Surgeon Agent.
On this episode of Interview with the Surgeon, we welcome Dr. Valluvan Jeevanandam, Chief of Cardiac and Thoracic Surgery at University of Chicago. He specializes in the surgical management of heart failure and is an expert in high-risk cardiac surgery. He has performed more than 1,000 heart transplants, including the total artificial heart. He is a world-renowned surgeon, having started high-risk and cardiac assist programs in countries like China, India, the Middle East, and South America. In October 2000, he was the first surgeon in the world to successfully implant the cardiovasc and continues to be a recognized leader in the field of advanced heart failure and currently serves on the FDA device panel. Dr. Jeevanandam was one of the physician leaders of the transplant care team that made history in December 2018 after performing 2 triple organ transplants within 27 hours. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Interview with the Surgeon. Today, we welcome Dr. Valluvan Jeevanandam, Chief of Cardiac and Thoracic Surgery at University of Chicago. Doc, how are we doing today?
Fantastic.
Thanks for being with us. So let's just jump right into it. What were your goals and aspirations during your residency, and how did those change during your fellowship?
Well, during residency, obviously the first goal is to try to get a fellowship. And, the question is, what type of fellowship do you want to do? Now, again, this is older data, right? This was in the late 80s. And, I had looked at 3 potential fellowships. So it was cardiac surgery, plastic surgery, or orthopedic surgery. I did some work in orthopedic surgery and realized that it just wasn't my fit. It wasn't as, there wasn't physiology involved with orthopedic surgery. And I thought I could do something a little bit more creative. I looked at plastic surgery and cardiac surgery, and, everybody said, definitely do plastic surgery. You'll have a better lifestyle. You'll make a lot more money. It's, you'll have a life. You'll have nights. You'll have weekends. And so I did some work in plastic surgery, and, cardiac was always my love. My grandfather died when I was 8 years old, right in front of our eyes with an MI, and that was in 1968, and there wasn't anything that we could do. So the heart always kind of fascinated me, and I kind of grew up at the time of transplants and artificial hearts and Dr. Cooley and Dr. DeBakey. So cardiac always fascinated me, but everybody said, if you do cardiac surgery, expect to get divorced. You're going to be alone. You're going to be in a hospital. You're not going to have a life. So I looked at plastic surgery, and then I did a rotation in cardiac. And, it just grabbed me because it's about physiology. It's about life and death. It's about making decisions, every second. Every stitch that you place can be the difference between life and death. And there was just a certain amount of excitement, and there was a certain amount of having to make very quick decisions that were important decisions. And, being able to take care of somebody who was dying and bring him back to life was just absolutely alluring. So kind of decided to do cardiac surgery, and it's worked out great. I had to do it all over again. I would do it 100 out of 100 times. I have a great caring family and a great wife who supported me. And so never got divorced, still have a family, and have enjoyed what I do to the point where when you if you leave in the morning and it's not work, but it's actually something that's fun, then all the extra hours that you're putting in and the weekends and all that, are not a problem. I'm not saying that it's an easy job. It's very difficult, and it's a 24/7 job because you could be having a great time, and all of a sudden you get a call from the ICU that your patient's not doing so well, and it's hard to compartmentalize. But on the other hand, it is something that I truly enjoy doing. So I guess my advice is, you have to do what you enjoy doing, because if you do that, and work is not a job, but work is something that is enjoyable, then you will succeed in it.
So what was your mentality during your fellowship and heading into your first job search, and how did that perspective change in the beginning years of your career?
So I wanted to do heart transplants and artificial devices. And so that really restricts your field somewhat, because You couldn't really do that in private practice, and you had to be in an academic medical center. And the problem there, of course, is that in academic medical centers, when I started off, there was only about 60 programs that were doing heart transplants. So now you're restricted down to 60 programs. And within those 60 programs, there's only about one person or two people doing transplants. So you're now restricted down to about 100 positions in the entire country. And so, I would have loved to stay at Columbia, but, there were other opportunities that were better for me. And, just looking around, again, you have to just be at the right place at the right time. You never know who's going to retire, who's going to move on to a different position, who's going to get promoted for an opportunity to open up. So I took a job at Temple University in Philadelphia. It was a position where I was second in command for heart transplants. And my mission was to start a lung transplant program. So I thought for a young person like that, it was a good opportunity. I started in February of '92. And in April 1st, my boss brought me to his office and he said, "Val, I have good news and bad news." And first of all, I thought it was an April 1st joke. And then I asked him, I said, "Well, what is the bad news?" And he said, "The entire transplant program, including the head surgeon, all the cardiologists, the coordinators, the patients, the pathologists, the dietitian, everybody was bought and moved to Hahnemann." So Hahnemann at that time was about a mile down the block from Temple. And I'm like, okay, so I came here to do heart transplants, and the heart transplant program just disappeared on me. And I asked him, I said, "What possibly is the good news?" And he goes, "Congratulations, you're director of the program now." And I looked at him and said, "Director of what program?" He said, "Val, I have complete confidence in you that you'll be able to build this program up." And so, it was kind of a challenge. It was kind of devastating news. But again, kind of one of my things I advise my fellows on is that, opportunities arise, and, you have to take full control of those opportunities and use them as stepping stones for your career. And those challenges occur all the time, and you just need to be prepared for them and deal with them. So what did we end up doing? So I inherited a program where everybody had moved. I partnered with the chief of cardiology who never had done transplants before. And I called my mentors at Columbia, and they said, "Hey, I know you can do this, and we will help support you." So for 2 years, I was the surgeon, the cardiologist, the pathologist, immunosuppressant person, everything. And we grew that program. When I inherited the program, they're doing 30 a year. And, probably because I was young and naive and didn't know, there were no kind of breaks on what I was doing. We ended up doing 50 that first year. We completely suppressed the Hahnemann program because their administration said, "We just spent $12 million. And at Temple, they're bigger than they ever were." And then after that first year, we were the top center in the United States for 4 straight years. In 1 year, doing over 100 transplants in 1997. So that was the springboard to my career. So it started off as kind of a catastrophic event where everybody left. And, my first response was, "I'm going to get the hell out of here too." But, it ended up becoming the best opportunity in my life because it made my reputation as a heart transplant cardiac surgeon. And, heart transplant is great, but it's a small niche. But what that did was give me a steady stream of patients who we were able to then help without doing a transplant. And that became my true niche, where, you have patients who have very low heart function, or who are, everybody else has given up on them and said, "You need a transplant." And then you're able to reconstruct their heart and avoid a transplant. So that really became my broader niche. And then from there, because of how successful we were at Temple, I was recruited to come to the University of Chicago, where I've been for 22 years. It's take on your challenges and consider them opportunities.
So what would you say were some of the keys to your success that shaped your early career as you climbed to the top of your industry?
Well, first of all, I didn't think about any type of time limits. I mean, it was just maniacal work. And I find that there was no life balance, right? And maybe those were the days when you could get away without life balance. I had a family that allowed me to do that. But just to put things in perspective, in 1997, when we did 100 heart transplants, we did 30 lung transplants. So it was 130 transplants done. And it was only me and my partners. There was only two of us doing 130 transplants. And so almost every other night, I was in the hospital. And, you know, I wasn't looking at, you know, where's my schedule? Where's my, you know, scheduled time off? You know, it's 5 o'clock, I'm off call. I mean, you just had to do maniacal amount of work in the early part of your career. And then as you establish your career and you become a chief, then you end up being able to delegate and recruit and build up a real team. But in the beginning, you are that team and you need to focus really, really hard. I think the other thing was I always had the mentality that, you know, the books are great and you read the books, but it's even cooler if you can rewrite the books. And so, you know, there were things that people said that couldn't be done, and you're always pushing the limits to get them done. So I think my kind of advice that I get is you have to focus on a particular niche field, because if you focus too broadly, let's say you want to be the best in doing bypass surgery. Well, there's 300,000 bypasses done for you to distinguish yourself doing bypass surgery. On the other hand, if you find a smaller niche, you papers, getting on the podium, and, you know, developing new techniques that you're known for, you develop those, and then you can develop a niche for yourself, right? And that niche then becomes your calling card. So focus on a niche, work tirelessly, and I think the other really important thing is enjoy what you're doing.
What advice do you have for the graduating residents and fellows entering the professional job market for the first time?
Now, I think it's a great question, because no one really teaches us that during fellowship or residency. I think the first thing is you have to think about what type of practice you want to join. Do you want to join an independent practice? Do you want to join an academic practice? Or do you want to join a large group practice, right? And they're very different. They're different in their reward structure. They're different in their workloads. You know, an academic practice, you'll have a lot of support around you. Probably won't make as much money as you can as an independent person. But, you know, you have to get into academia, and that's always the difficult portion, because the number of positions is pretty fixed. And, you know, you're waiting for either someone to leave, retire, or, you know, some programs expanding their practice. The advantages of academia are that, you know, your salary is pretty fixed. Again, you know, the upside is lower, and so is the downside from a reimbursement perspective. You do have a lot more support, and you get a chance to teach fellows and residents. If you really want to do academic medicine, then what you need to do is find a small niche and really focus on that niche and be the world's expert on that niche. And that's how you kind of market yourself and make yourself into an elite surgeon. You know, the other type of practice, of course, are solo practices, which, you know, then whatever you're generating, you keep. So generally more lucrative. You have less support in that, you know, you are the only person. So in one aspect, there's less competition. If you're in an academic medical center, they may be 4 other elite surgeons that you're kind of quote unquote competing against, although they may be your partners. You're competing against them with volume. But in a solo practice, you can create it so it's yourself. Generally, solo practices are going to be more in areas that aren't hugely favorable. So they're not going to be in big cities. And then, of course, there's kind of this hybrid, like working for a Kaiser or you work for a large corporation, you almost like you can clock in and clock out type work. And for some people that's good because you're not having the toughest part of my job. I mean, I'm an academic medicine. I have administrative responsibilities, all that. For my clinical practice, the toughest thing is actually getting patients. The advantage of working for somebody like Kaiser is you don't need to get the patients. They'll get the patients for you. And so you can just concentrate on surgery. And, in essence, when you're not on call and you leave, you kind of sign out and you're done. If you have a private practice or you're an academic practice, you're always on, right? You're on 24/7. The other advice I would have is make sure that you have a right person counseling you on the terms of the contract, understand things like tails for malpractice, and kind of maximize your return, because the amount of money you get to start almost sets the bar for what you get later. So if you start off really low, you have a harder chance to catch up. So really you need to start as high as possible. And that sometimes requires a professional negotiator, because in general, we're very kind of timid to talk about reimbursement and compensation, right? And so it'd be great to have somebody do that for you. Go over the contract, look at things like restrictive covenants. If you happen to leave the practice, where can you practice? Because if you build up a significant patient base, right, you don't want to give that up. And, is the restrictive covenant for a certain amount of miles? Sometimes they're so broad that they can be fought in court and thrown out, right? I mean, if someone says, yes, you're working at University of Chicago, but you can't practice in Illinois, I mean, that's way too broad. But what we do for our restrictive covenants is we put 3 institutions that we think would be our biggest competitor to say that you can't practice there. Those are much more enforceable. And the flip side to it, as the employee, they are things that you really probably can't break. Numbers like 10 miles, 5 miles is pretty reasonable. You also have to depend on where your locations are. So it's kind of my advice, have a professional negotiate for you, have a professional actually look at your contract, try to negotiate the most favorable terms possible, get somewhat of a guarantee for, whether it's 2 or 3 years, because it'll take you that long to grow a practice. So what you don't want to be is incentivized by like RVUs and not be able to hit those RVUs because you don't have a patient base yet. As I said, make a real decision about what type of practice you want. Now, you may not be able to get what you want, in which case you have to make a decision. Do you do something temporarily and keep looking? Or do you say, hey, this is the best I got. It's an opportunity. I'm going to take the opportunity and run with it. And, those are things that you need to think about.
Can you give us some insight on what it was like to be the first surgeon in the world to successfully implant the CardioVad?
So, it's actually interesting. So I've been the first surgeon in the world implanting the CardioVad and the new Pulse IVAS device. The CardioVad was actually invented by Dr. Kankowitz, who was the father of balloon pumps. And this was an idea that he had for a permanent balloon pump. And we ended up implanting that. It's great because when you're the first person in the world doing it, there's no one teaching you how to do it. So you're inventing it as you go. And it's potentially painful if it doesn't work. And you just have to be really, really creative. the device that I'm particularly proud of is the New Pulse IVAS. So the New Pulse IVAS is a device that me and the company called New Pulse and University of Chicago all kind of joint developed. And so we developed it, had the idea behind it, put it in animals, and then did the first in human implants at University of Chicago Medicine. That was a fascinating concept because literally we had taken something from a piece of paper and now we're putting it into a patient and helping a patient. And there was a huge learning curve because implanting in an animal is very different than implanting it in a human, both from engineering perspective, alarm perspectives. Patients would actually interact with it and benefit from it. But being the first in the world, you know, first of all, you have to develop a great team. So I had a team of people doing it with me. And, you know, the first time we did it, you turn the machine on, it doesn't work. And it was also good having kind of the engineering background to be able to troubleshoot it backwards because I'd been involved with the inception. So, you know, we can figure out exactly what the issue was and fix the issue. And, you know, the first patient took like 9 hours to implant. And, you know, we now do it within 2.5 hours. So there is a large learning curve. But I think the most exciting thing was having an idea, being able to take the idea from a piece of paper to a patient, and kind of the thrill of realizing there's nobody to lean on, right? There isn't no teacher that you're going to say, hey, what problems did you have when you did this, right? It was probably one of those few devices that I've implanted where there wasn't an in-service because we were the in-service. And then after we implanted, I think it was 30 of them, then we have gone out to other institutions to get them. But then, you know, they would always call me or call people in my team and say, hey, what happens if this scenario was there? And the first 30 patients, we learned through those scenarios. So it's exciting, exhilarating. It's kind of what I do. You know, I don't want to have to read it in a book. I want to be able to write it in a book and have people follow us. And so first in human trials are very, they're different because you don't have a safety net, right? You're kind of, it's like a trapezoid without a safety net. And, you know, it's, you have to be very, very creative and be able to think on your feet. And those were exciting times. And, you know, hopefully as the career progresses, we'll be doing many more first in human implants.
So I know that December 2018 was a very special time for you. Can you kind of tell us what that experience was like doing 2 triple organ transplants successfully?
Yeah, so when we talk about triple organ transplants, we talk about a heart, liver, and a kidney. And this all started in 1999. So I came to the University of Chicago. Now, our heart program was very small at that point. The liver program was actually much larger. And one of the liver surgeons came to me and he said he had a patient with hepatitis that they wanted to do a liver transplant on, but the heart had been affected by the hepatitis as well and wasn't really pumping very well. And because the heart wasn't pumping well, he also had kidney failure. And he said, hey, you want to think about doing a triple organ transplant? This was 1999. And Dr. Starzl had done one like 15 years earlier and basically had written it off as saying it's something that nobody could actually survive because it was such a huge operation. So in 1999, we did the first one successfully at University of Chicago Medicine. And, you know, it was a marathon operation. It was like 40 hours and stuff, but the patient ended up living for 10 to, I think they lived for 11 years after the surgery, ended up dying of liver complications, but her heart was okay. So we always knew that we could do it, but you have to have the right team. You have to have the right cardiac team, you have the right liver and the kidney team. And so, you know, we've had some fluxes in different people, and it just so happened that, you know, we had done some cases sporadically over the next decade, but in 2018, we kind of had really a crackerjack abdominal transplant team with Dr. Fung, who's like a world's leader, Dr. Baker, and we had a great kidney transplant surgeon. So we said, we now have the milieu for doing this, so let's put people on the list. And as happens with transplant, right, you can't really predict. Transplant's like being a fireman. You could be sitting around eating and not doing anything, and then all of a sudden you're working, a week at a time. So transplant's the same way. I mean, we did 2 patients. The first one ended up getting listed, and they both came in because of heart problems. So Sarah, because at University of Chicago now our heart program's kind of grown, so most of the referrals come to us. So, all these patients came to us with heart problems, and the heart leading to liver problems and kidney problems. So, Sarah she'd had 5 previous operations. This was her 6th. And, we had in our mind kind of designed this is all like manufacturing processing, right? You have to figure out, how long is it going to take for the heart? How do you hand off the heart? How do you hand off the heart in such a way that is seamless to the liver people? And then, so the whole sequence is the heart gets done first. We leave the chest open because you can't close the heart and constrict it while they're doing the liver transplant. So you do the heart, leave it open, end up doing the liver, and then they do the kidney. So all the organs are then actually in the patient and being perfused. Then the heart team comes back and closes up the chest, the liver team closes up the belly, and then the kidney team finishes up closing up the lower abdomen. And so we had kind of mapped out the process for the first patient, Sarah, in our heads, but hadn't, we had done some triple organ transplants, like 2 over the last decade, kind of the same number everybody else had done. But we really thought that with the current team that we had, we could pull off the triples. And so the first patient was on the list. The second patient was actually even sicker than the first. He had cardiac arrest, and we didn't even think he was going to make it, but then he kind of rallied, made it. He needed a triple organ transplant. So he ended up actually going first, and he was the easier heart transplant because he'd not had any previous surgery. So, we did his heart, and kind of towards the middle of doing his heart, we got another call for the person who had multiple sternotomies. And, when you do transplants, it's not like you can be picky and choosy about timing. When you have an opportunity, you just got to go with it. And, because the first patient, Daru Smith, had gone so well and was actually in the process of going well, we said, great, we'll just take the second organ the second set of organs as well. And so we did his heart, they did his liver, did his kidney, and just as we were closing up, the second triple organ patient came in, and we repeated the whole process again. So, it's kind of the epitome of the endurance of a transplant team, because we were in the OR for those 2 cases, because you can't do the heart transplant and just leave. You got to do the heart transplant, stick around till the other transplants are done, because at any moment, the heart can act up, or they could be doing something wrong, like have major blood loss that can affect the heart. And so we started with the first transplant. We finished with the first transplant in 27 hours. And then we started the second transplant like an hour or 2 after the first, and kept going. So there were people on my team, including myself, who were in the hospital for 48 straight hours, because you had the first transplant at 27, you had the second transplant, couldn't really leave till the second transplant was completed. So, it's when I talk about cardiac surgery, I talk about bypass surgery being a technical exercise, valve surgery being kind of an artistic exercise you need to have 3-dimensional visualization, and kind of transplant surgery is endurance and an intellectual exercise, because you have to really know what you can get away with organs, how much of a limit you can stretch. You have to match the right donor to the right recipient, and you have to have the endurance to pull it off as well. So I think those triple organs really, exhibited that aspect of transplant surgery. And it's also really interesting that we ended up getting such notoriety for the triple doubles when in reality we've done much more difficult operations and spectacular things. But it's really interesting how it's it's kind of coincidence, multiple things going on, and it was just a very, very inspiring and innovative story that it just got picked up by AP and then it just went viral. And so it's interesting because there were, like, the new Pulse IVAS was a device that had never been implanted at any time in the world, and no matter how hard we tried, no one was really interested in it. But this story, which to us was great but not spectacular because we've done stuff like more difficult operations, etc. But it got really picked up because it was the right people, it was the right meshing of the message, because we had one person who was kind of a Caucasian middle-aged person coming from the suburbs who had great parents taking care of her. And on the other hand, you had a truck driver from the south side of Chicago who was the caregiver for the rest of his family. And, he was getting a triple organ. And the fact that they became friends was like a beautiful marriage of a microcosm of America, And so the fact that they were friends, they were done one after another, and they encouraged each other going to the gym and working out, was a lot more of the interesting aspect of it. But of course, there was also the medicine aspect of it. And by doing them, we then developed an entire protocol. And since then, we've done 4 more. And so in the history of the world, there have been 22 done, and we've done 11 of them. So we've done 50% of all the ones that are done in the world. But basically because we have a system now, right? So we realized what the hiccups were, how we could improve the process, and we've now implemented that. So now when we do a triple organ transplant, things go much smoother.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Interview with the Surgeon. Until next time, stay focused and keep following your dreams.